All right, we should be good to go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is now 6:10 p.m. This CPOC Commissioners meeting is hereby called to order. This CPOC Commissioners meeting was properly advertised pursuant to the Sunshine Act of Pennsylvania. My name is Hassan Bennett. I am the chair of the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, and I will be facilitating this meeting. We will start with roll call. Commissioners, when I say your name, please acknowledge you're here. Commissioner Gilberto Gonzalez.
Commissioner Gonzalez present. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Commissioner Hakeem, PA.
Commissioner PA present.
Good evening. Commissioner Latanya Whitehead.
Commissioner Whitehead present. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Commissioner John Solomon.
Commissioner Solomon present. Good evening.
Good evening. Commissioner Malika Rahman.
Regular person? Okay.
Commissioner Rockmine here. Sorry, I was trying to assist
Can
Commissioner.
I do you? Hey, I'm here.
Wait.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I was trying to assist Commissioner Enix Kenny, but Commissioner Rockmine is here. Thank you.
For all those that are new to this commissioners meeting and the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, Commissioner Rahman is our vice chair. Commissioner Michelle Enix Kenny.
Commissioner Michelle Edix Kenny here. I'm here, family. I'm here.
Good evening. So for the record, Commissioner Michelle Enix Kenny is attending this meeting via phone through Commissioner Rockman's booth. I guess that's what we'll call it, Zoom booth, however we want to call it tonight, due to technical difficulties. Commissioner Melanie DeBose has an excused absence at the moment. She called ahead of time, she went through protocol, and she has an excused absence from this meeting. Hello? Commissioner Erica Stewart. Is Commissioner Stewart in the chat? I'll give it a second.
No, she's not here, looks like.
Okay. At the moment, Commissioner Stewart has an unexcused absence. If she pops up in a meeting, will somebody please notify me? And with that, we have a full quorum this evening. Next, we shall go enter into commissioner business. Commissioners, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda for this evening?
Yes.
If anyone has not had a chance to review the agenda for this evening's commissioner meeting, could you please say so now? And with that said, do I hear a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Yes,
Vice Chair Rockmine here. It is my motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda.
Does anyone second Commissioner Rockman's motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda?
Commissioner Solomon, I second the motion.
And with that, we now have a motion on the table. All in favor of approving tonight's meeting agenda, say aye.
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 All those who oppose, say nay. And with that, the ayes have it. Tonight's meeting agenda has been approved. and I will forward the meeting to our executive director, Ms. Tanya McClary.
Chair, before we start the agency report, I believe the board is considering the March meeting minutes tonight.
One second. Has everyone had a chance to review the March meeting minutes?
Yes, Chair.
As I have been out of my email, I have not had a chance to review the March meeting minutes. So I will sustain from this vote. But even with me sustaining from this vote, we still have a full quorum to pass the meeting minutes for March. So with that being said, do I hear a motion to approve the March meeting minutes?
A motion to approve. This is Commissioner Gonzalez. I motion to approve March minutes.
That is Commissioner Gonzalez motioning to approve the meeting minutes for March. Does anyone second that motion?
This is Commissioner Whitehead. I second that motion.
And with that, we have a motion on the table. All in favor of approving the March meeting minutes, say aye.
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 All those who oppose, say nay. And with that, the ayes have it. And at this point, I will pass the meeting over to our executive director.
Just flagging for the record that Commissioner Stewart is here. I just promoted her to panelist.
And with that, Commissioner Stewart is present. Good evening, Commissioner Stewart. Executive Director.
Good evening, everyone. All righty. So we are ready to present the agency report. And so the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, our mission is to oversee and investigate the conduct, policy, and practices of the Philadelphia Police Department. And so currently CPOC receives complaints of police misconduct. We receive commendations to celebrate officers who go above and beyond the call of duty. We audit and monitor internal affairs investigations and police disciplinary processes. We sit and vote on PBI panels at police discipline hearings. We conduct oversight of police shootings, analyze police data, develop policy recommendations and reports, and engage in outreach and training. And so we always like to talk about why civilian oversight is necessary. And so it does many things. It protects human rights. It promotes constitutional policing. It increases public confidence and trust in the police. It builds bridges between law enforcement and the public, supports effective policing, ensures greater accountability, and enhances risk management. And so normally I would give a little bit of some of how this plays out, but I'm excited because tonight we have the deputy's desk. And so on the Thursdays, the meeting days where Deputy Osiande was at, I will not do that so that you all will be able to hear directly from him. But I do want to say a few things to the commission and just to the public. Tonight, you're going to be hearing from our Odyssey Policy and Research Division as well as the Complaints Division. And so you might say, well, what happened to investigations? And so I am happy to report that I always give you all the data from the month before. So I'm happy to report that in the month of March, there were no police shootings at people. And so there were some dog shootings, but no person was shot or shot at by a Philadelphia police officer. And so I am excited to say that that's the reason why you will not be hearing from the investigative division this month. However, there had been at least one shooting in the month of April. So next month in May, you will be hearing from the investigative division about that shooting and any others that may happen between now and the end of April. So I just wanted to alert people about that. And then this is some really great news that the commission will be excited to learn. And I want to thank Commissioner Melanie DeBose for updating the office. But 3 of your commissioners' terms were expiring. And so City Council today renewed those 3 commissioners. So you are still a 9-person commission, which is exciting. It was a unanimous vote by council. So being renewed for another term are our chair, Hassan Bennett, Commissioner Melanie DeBose, and our Commissioner John Solomon. So that was very exciting news today. Like I said, it was unanimous. And City Council renewed the appointment of those 3 commissioners. So I just wanted to share that with the commission and with the public. And so we are excited about that. And so with that, I'm going to go to the next slide, which I believe is going to be, okay. Which order, Deputy Osayande, are you going after the other departments?
Yes, I will be completing our staff report today.
Okay, so we're going to turn it over to the Director of Administration, Danny Guy, to talk about our complaints for the month of March.
Good evening, folks. So the complaint report for the month of March can be found on our website. I just put it on the chat if you're interested in reviewing it. I will start with just going through some of the complaints summaries for the month of March. One complainant had a verbal dispute with his mother, which resulted in her calling police to request a 302 mental health commitment. For the complainant attempted to flee the home and head to the police district. The complainant told officers they did not wish to go in for an evaluation because they had already been evaluated. The complainant fled from police and was chased by another officer. The complainant had already sustained injuries from earlier that day, so they gave up running and told the officer, "I surrender." The officer aggressively tackled the complainant to the ground and purposely pushed his face into the concrete. Another complainant witnessed teens being arrested at City Hall. The complainant believed that the initial arrest may have been warranted, but the situation escalated due to the police antagonizing the teens. The complainant heard one of the officers yell, "I will beat the shit out of you," at a young woman, which the complainant felt was not justifiable behavior. Another complainant was driving, approached an intersection and stopped because he felt that making the turn was unsafe due to the road hazards from the previous snowstorm. As we all remember, March and February had a lot of snow. A marked patrol vehicle was also stopped at the intersection, and an officer yelled out to him using profanity and foul language. The complainant then exited his vehicle and began to record the incident. The primary officer was halted and approached the complainant aggressively with their hand on their service weapon. Another complainant's son was pulled over by an officer for tinted windows. This was the second time the officer had pulled over their son. The officer directed the son to get out of the vehicle, and the son initially refused to step out. A verbal argument ensued, and the officer pulled the son out of the car and placed him into the back of the police vehicle. The officer then improperly searched the vehicle. During this incident, the officer was needlessly rough with the complainant's son while removing him from the vehicle and purposely targeted the son. Another complaint and his friend were stopped outside a restaurant picking up food. Both the complainant and his friend were detained by police, asking if they were carrying a weapon. The complainant was handcuffed tightly to the point that his wrist sustained a cut and red marks. After it was confirmed that the complainant was not the robbery suspect the officers were looking for, he was released. The complainant requested the names and badge numbers of the officers involved, and one of the officers verbally taunted the complainant. On this next set of slides, we have the demographic breakdown for complainants for race and ethnicity for the month of March. So there were 23 complaints that were referred in the month of March. These break down the demographics. And it should be noted that an individual can identify as more than one race and ethnicity. So the count might not be exactly 23. On this next slide, we have the breakdown of the year to date. So there were 73 complaints that were referred to Internal Affairs between January and March, those 3 months. These are the demographics, and similar to the previous slide, an individual can identify as multiple races, so the count might not be exact. On this next slide, we have a breakdown of the demographics for gender. Similar to the other slides, someone can have identify in multiple genders, but this breakdown on the right side is for the month of March, and then on the other side is the year to date. On this next slide, we have a breakdown of our allegations for year to date for for the calendar year 2026. Similar to most months, you can see that the departmental violations is our number one, followed by lack of service. On this next slide, we break down departmental violations. We always like to be a little bit more specific, since that can be a nebulous term. Some of the violations can be directive violations, so PPD policy violations, stop and detention, similar to some of the complaints that I had mentioned, as well as improper search and seizure. On this next slide, it breaks down the zip codes of where these incidents have happened so far in 2026. And then on this following slide, it breaks it down via police district. And then the last slide for complaints. This is our little graph that we've been creating month to month. So we now have 3 data points for January, February, and March, and how they compare to other years. Interestingly enough, March was sort of a lower month for us, but still above other previous years. And that ends the complaint report. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Yes, Commissioner Solomon here. I'm not really sure if you prepared to answer this question, but how does blacks complaints compare with white people complaints? Like what are the 2 different types of complaints in comparison to each other, if you know that information?
I can't really answer that just like off the cuff. What I can say, I mean, based on our demographics, we receive more complaints from individuals who identify as African American. So just looking at the breakdown of race. So African American, Black African American is this sort of like pea green color, as it were. And then, so there's 34 that identify from the 73 complaints that we submitted, so a much larger percent compared to the 18 that identify as white. And then we have several other races, as well as some that are not reported or preferred not to answer. I can't, like, I to tell you how those, like, we'd have to go through and really compare and contrast them. I don't want to speak out of turn on them, but I can say anecdotally, we see a lot more of the like search and seizures and stop and detention often are more commonly reported by individuals who are African American and typically male. So those complaints are pretty common for those individuals.
Okay, that's I guess that's good good enough for now. I've seen like some trends recently just online. I know online is a little different than somebody actually submitting a complaint. But I've been seeing trends of like videos of police driving around, shouting off their windows. Do you have anything on your waist or look like you have something on your waist? There's been a number of videos that I've saw in recent weeks, which kind of led me to, be a little bit more curious as to like what type of complaints are, coming through, um, and in comparison to both demographics. So thank you. I guess I'll give you some more time and maybe follow up to see if you have that
Yeah, if
information.
you want to follow up with me and Miguel, I'm sure we could look at the full data set from 2025 since that's complete, and look at what complaints were received um, spread out between each demographic and sort of analyze that. He might be able to him and Allison might be able to pull up some more specific information and look at like the allegations that are tied to each subsect of complaints. But yeah, I just don't have the data off the top of my head. But anecdotally, I can say like most of those complaints that we see that have to do with like stops and search and seizure are more commonly people of color, often those who identify as Black African American.
And are you able, like, with the complaints, are you able to see like age demographics too?
We don't report on them, but if the person puts their birthday in, which is on our complaint form, we can look at that. We normally write that down and ask Miguel. I don't know if that's something we've ever like looked at.
I
The
think that's
problem with it is like, so for example, one of the complaints I read, I think it was like number th 4, like the complainant who filled it out was their mother, but it was the son. So like that might skew the data in a weird way where it's like the
hmm
complainant might be in their 30s, 40s, and they're reporting the complaint about their son who was the teenager, and we don't know. So that's where like I think age can be challenging because sometimes it's not always. And actually, there was another complaint, the second one, where it was a different individual. I don't know what their age was, but they were noticing teens having this poor interaction with police. So like it's the age can be a little challenging, but it is something we could definitely look into. Um,
We
did
also,
that?
I'll just note, Danny, and Commissioner Solomon, we also track the demographic information in the audit cases that we do. So, Danny would be able to share information from complaints that are filed with the office, but then when we are reviewing the case and auditing it, once the investigation is complete, we're collecting demographic information at all also. So we would be able to say like, of all the improper stop allegations that we have in our case management system, here's the demographic breakdown, here's the district breakdown. Like we could get into details with some of that stuff based on the level of detail we collect during our processes. So if there are specific questions you have or things you're curious about, we can definitely talk to Miguel about that and he can help like figure out how to pull that stuff out of our data sets. The audit data will be a little bit less up to date because it's investigations that have already been finished. So it wouldn't be like, up to today, but we would still be able to see, what's been done so far.
okay. Yeah, that's good. And I understand what Danny's saying in regards to like the difficulties. And I just think it's so important like to have that information or to consider that information, especially when you consider, people like myself and other leaders that are on the commission that does work out in the community, to understand what demographic are being engaged by police in a way that demonstrates some level of misconduct. I think that's super important. And I also think it's important that if, I'm having conversations with younger people and what's been consistent is that younger people saying that they have been, harassed for whatever reason by police. And, we're not seeing any complaints from individuals. That also kind of tells me that, okay, maybe you need to be educated on how to actually submit a complaint properly, so that we can have that information when, doing this work as, Citizens Police Oversight Commission. So that was my thought process behind that. But thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Commissioner Solomon, to your point, I mean, the wonderful thing about now having the director of data is that we've always done this, but now we're trying to make it even more robust is to look at patterns and practices, which goes to your point about are there specific parts of the city? Are there certain ages, races, whatever, sexual orientation And so being able to have somebody now coming to do that is really important. And even to your point, like you said, if you're hearing these things and we're not seeing it, then that helps us think about maybe some of our constituent services and outreach in terms of doing trainings for community members on how to file complaints. So this is really important that you're raising. And we are really excited to hear from you, hear from the other commissioners around these issues, and as we start to really, move our data processes forward.
Commissioner Gonzalez, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, in the same thread as Commissioner Solomon, just thinking, do we have access or can we get access to the docket numbers? Because when police have interactions with folks, they have to report it. They have to put a docket number. Do we have access to those?
So, Janine, do you know how to answer that question? I think docket is a different word than what you're thinking. They would write a police report number.
Yeah.
Docket would be more like a legal proceeding, but the police report number, we don't really have access to. That is data I think we want in the long term, but we just don't have PBD's full unfettered access currently, sadly.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, I will pass it over to Janine.
Great. Thanks, Danny. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I'm here to give a summary of the work that our division, the Auditing Policy and Research Division, did in the month of March. I always like to give a refresher of what our auditing process is for anyone who may not remember. So the auditing process involves our team reviewing case file materials for closed internal affairs investigations into complaints made by members of the public. So we receive a digital version of the case file that includes the final report of investigation, interview memos. We receive access to the body-worn camera footage, and we reviewed these materials within 11 business days, and then we notify the department if we are giving them any feedback or any recommendations to improve the thoroughness or the quality of the investigation. So we send specific individual recommendations if we see the need to do that. An example would be that the investigator should interview all officers present during the incident or explain why officers were not interviewed. So this process allows our staff to review these investigations while they are still technically open and allows us to give feedback about anything in the investigation that we think is materially impacting the outcomes of the case. We use the same series of questions to assess each case that we look at so that our reviews can be consistent and we can be collecting data information over time. Next slide, please, Danny. So why does this data matter? It all adds up and allows us to make recommendations to the police department about how to improve their processes or increase consistency and fairness across investigations over time. And it allows our oversight staff to have direct impact on outcomes. And these reports that I give each month to you are intended to help show some of that impact that we have. So any data or trends or themes that we observe in the auditing work that we do then can give us some direction and some focus to create project work or advocacy around certain issues that may arise. So for the month of March, we received 39 cases from internal affairs and were able to review 26. So that's 66% of the cases, 2/3 we were able to look at. 23 of those cases were full investigations and 3 were divisional cases, meaning they were shorter and quicker and were more of a fast resolution to a low level misconduct complaint. Next slide, please. So this graphic is showing the percentage of cases that we're able to audit each month and how that number has changed over time. There's always variation in the number. It can go up or down based on staff capacity or vacations or the sheer volume of cases that the department may send over on any given day. So we aim to audit 80% of the cases we receive, but again, this can fluctuate depending on a lot of factors. Next slide, please. So these are some quality metrics that we look at in our audits. I'd like to share a handful of them with you all during these reports. People are always concerned about the timeline of these investigations and how long they take. So in the cases we looked at in March, roughly 2/3 that we audited were completed within the 90-day business day guideline. And we're always looking at the evidence that the investigators are presenting and double checking to make sure that the findings that they are giving are actually matching up with all the evidence presented. So in 3/4 of the cases that we looked at, we found that the findings of the investigation did align with the evidence presented. So that's a good statistic that we saw. Next slide, please. We're always paying attention to whether or not the investigators are capturing all of the allegations that were made by the complainant, as well as all of the violations that are present in the case file. Sometimes we'll see on body-worn camera footage additional violations made by the officer that maybe the complainant didn't know about or didn't allege. So we're trying to capture all of those as well. And that is all in accordance with policies at Internal Affairs for how they should do their investigations. They have very clear policies that say all allegations must be captured and all violations must also be captured. So we ask if all allegations and violations were actually addressed on the conclusions page of the report of investigation. And about half of the times they were, half of the time they were not in this batch of audits. So the table on the right-hand side is showing the missing allegations that we identified in this batch of cases. Directive violations were the highest, and we had a relatively high number of improper frisks that were not addressed. So someone was patted down and that was captured somewhere in the evidence and it just wasn't addressed in the investigation. The failure to activate body-worn cameras is usually a pretty common allegation or violation that we see that they're not addressing properly, but there was just one in this batch, so that was an improvement. That they are catching those body-worn camera violations more frequently, hopefully because we've been calling them out on it so often and they're kind of catching up a little bit. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this graphic is showing the different allegation findings that were present in this batch of cases that we audited this past month. So 9 out of the 23 cases, full investigations that we reviewed had sustained allegations. There were 17 individual allegations that had a sustained finding. So that suggests that when there is sustained misconduct in a case, there's more than one sustained allegation happening. It's not like a one-off for an officer or for an incident. There's usually more than one thing going wrong during that encounter. We have on here that the bottom bar, it says finding of complete with diversion in parentheses. If you recall at a recent meeting, we discussed the new disciplinary diversion program at the department. So this is going to capture how many allegations were actually sent over to the diversion program rather than going into the disciplinary process. So 17 of those allegations in this batch went through diversion. Those would have been sustained allegations in the past, but now they are going into the diversion program. Next slide, please. So of the 23 full investigations we audited, we ended up sending feedback memos for 14 of those, or about 60%. In the last report that I gave on cases from January and February, we sent feedback for 68% of cases. So not a huge decrease, but a decrease nonetheless in feedback that we provided this past month. Initial calculations for the calendar year 2025 show that we sent memos for 67% of the cases we reviewed. And that figure was 70% for 2024. So not a huge change over time. Ideally, we would love to see the percentage of cases that we're sending feedback for go down more dramatically over time. So just paying attention to that and looking to see what may be going on or where we can sort of have more dialogue with internal affairs about what's going on with these cases and what kinds of recommendations we're making more consistently. Next slide. Thank you. Speaking of recommendations, this graphic is showing us what types of recommendations we did make in the month of March. The most common recommendation we made was to add missing administrative violations. Those would be the violations that the complainant did not report but occurred nonetheless. Body-worn camera violations would be something like that. Improper completion of a report. something not seen or known by the complainant, but still needing to be addressed and corrected. Um, we do have a recommendation on here to add an allegation that was made by the complainant. That was less frequent. There was three of those this past month. So it's looking like investigators are better at capturing allegations made by complainants than they are at capturing all the additional violations that are there. We also made two diversion related recommendations this month. We made two recommendations that an officer should receive discipline rather than diversion for their misconduct based on the totality of the circumstances of the case. Oftentimes when we catch those, I reach out directly to internal affairs to give them a heads up. We'll make that recommendation. They typically catch it themselves and will remedy it as well, but not always. So we're still having some good conversations with them about diversion and which cases are appropriate for it. Next slide, please. And I like to give an example of recommendations we make just to sort of bring this work to life. So in one case during an officer interview, he was asked why he didn't complete a use of force report for pushing several individuals in a crowd during a kind of chaotic encounter on a street. Use of force report is required whenever an officer uses any physical force to subdue someone or they use force in the course of their duties. And it's required by a directive. So we noted that other officers in the same case had sustained findings for the same violation of not doing a report. But the report of investigation did not state whether this sergeant should have completed the use of force reports. So it was unclear why some officers were being punished for this conduct while another was not. So we made a recommendation to address, the investigator should address whether this officer should have done that report, and if so, add a sustained finding for him. So the goal is to increase consistency and fairness in this particular case across all the officers who were involved, and hopefully that increases it across investigations and all officers are receiving the same treatment for any misconduct they may commit in any given incident. Next slide, please. And the audit findings here are just showing, oh, sorry, this is going on to Mike. So I was like, this graph doesn't look familiar. So I'm going to pass this over to Michael Tooley. He is our senior analyst, and he recently authored and published another body worn camera compliance report related to the 15th district. We published this last week, I believe, and so Mike is here to talk about the findings of that particular district's body worn camera audit report. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. It's good to be back. I'm glad that I'm here and able to share this information with you all. It's good that we're like pushing forward with this project. So we have one more district before we kind of take a break and reassess. So tonight I'm just going to share with you very briefly some of the audit findings that we had for the 15th district. But just like a little bit of background, I want you all to know like and have a good understanding of how we get the sample of videos that we're auditing. So it basically starts with us making a request for all of the incidents that happen in a particular district for a specific month. We then take a random sample of those incidents. We request the body worn camera footage for those incidents as well as the 7548 reports. Those are the reports that Commissioner Gonzalez had mentioned earlier. So we basically use all the data that they give us, and then that's how we do our audit, our surveys, and also determine compliance and our metrics here. So just to start, a little bit of information about these 6 primary compliance metrics that we're looking at here. The incident compliance is basically just an assessment of if an incident should have been recorded, wasn't recorded. Our officer compliance here is the total percentage of officers with the body worn camera that we observed that recorded a video for the sample. The activation by all officers, that is the total percentage of incidents that we observed in which each responding officer recorded a body worn camera video. Incident captured in its entirety is self-explanatory, but we just want to make sure that the incidents are recorded from the time that the officer arrives until the completion of the incident. Activation from standby mode. We are measuring whether or not officers are activating their camera from the ready mode, and we want to make sure that the cameras are ready to record prior to the activation. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. And then our last major primary compliance metric is the correct categorization. And we basically just want to make sure that the officers are correctly categorizing these videos in their digital media evidence database. Great. So again, for this first data point that we're looking at, we are making sure that the officers that we observed in the sample are recording body-worn camera videos. So in this sample, we observed 49 total body-worn camera videos. We saw 57 total officers, and of those 57, 51 or 89% recorded a video for these incidents. The next two graphs that we're looking at here, again, we are measuring to make sure that that the incident is captured by all the available officers on scene. Again, just to kind of reiterate, this kind of goes to an evidentiary standpoint. There are a lot of times where things happen, and sometimes the officer that's closest to the incident might not capture it. So having body-worn camera videos from officers that are in like a peripheral capacity or that are kind of surrounding the incident kind of gives you a better vantage point to actually tell what happens. So it is important that each responding officer captures a body-worn camera, captures the incident using their body-worn camera. So in this sample, we found that of the 49 total videos, 43 or 88% each officer present recorded the incident. The next metric that we're looking at here, we just want to make sure that the body-worn camera video captures the duration of the encounter. Of the 49 videos, 45 of those, or 92%, captured the entire incident. And we have a little bit more data about that I'll share on one of the following slides. Great. Another thing that we're measuring is just making sure that cameras are activated from standby mode. For those that are unfamiliar, standby mode, it basically just means that the camera is on and it's ready to record. What this suggests here is that some officers in the 15th district were on patrol with their cameras off, and then they turn them on prior to then capturing the recording. This is something that we've kind of identified as a barrier to capturing body-worn camera videos. Basically, if an incident does start quickly and an officer's camera isn't on, then it just makes it that much harder for them to turn their camera on and then record the incident. So this was the 15 district's biggest area for improvement. During our meeting with them, we were able to talk with them, and they kind of had some ideas about why it was like that. So it was good to just kind of get their perspective and also be able to kind of share this with them just to make sure that they were aware. And our last primary compliance metric that we're looking at, Dan, you can go back real quick. Thank you. The last compliance metric that we were looking at is just making sure that the videos are correctly categorized. This is important for retention. So these videos are saved depending on what they're categorized as. So if a video is incorrectly categorized, the department just might not have access to it if they need to. And then our last metrics that we're looking at here pertain to the incident compliance. So again, we just want to make sure that if this is an incident that should be recorded, that it is recorded by the responding officers. So in our sample, there were 44 incidents that should have been recorded, and we found that only 32 of those were recorded, which means that there were 12 incidents that should have been recorded but weren't. We did kind of break these down a little bit. They didn't cleanly fall into a particular category, so we just kind of grouped them together. So our largest or most frequent category that was unrecorded was investigative premise. As you can see here, there were a couple of times that police responded to a theft or a burglary. There was also an officer that responded to a domestic incident, an officer that responded to a disturbance, and then an officer that conducted an investigation of a person on a SEPTA bus or vehicle. There were also 4 incidents that we categorized as a pedestrian stop or a meet complainant. It looks like there were 2 incidents in which an officer was called to the scene and ended up citing an individual. There was one in which an officer was called to the scene and provided a report of a stolen vehicle. And it looks like there was one incident in which the officer was called and responded to an aggravated assault. And again, these were incidents that were not recorded. Our last group here is other vehicle services. These are common ones, I think, that sometimes aren't reported. Some of these incidents don't require the officers to complete a report. So I think by default, they think that they might not have to record. But again, we are kind of going by the standard that is listed in the policy, which basically details that all police-related encounters or activities should be recorded. So, and again, those were the 12 incidents that weren't recorded that should have been. Great. And some additional findings that we have here. We only saw one instance in which a video contained an error in the titling, the labeling, or the labeling. And again, this is just making sure that videos are easily accessible in the digital evidence database. We found that 53% of the videos were recorded within all departmental guidelines. And the threshold that we set for that is we just want to make sure that the incident is captured in its entirety, that there are no prohibited activities, and also that the camera was activated from standby mode. We found that 8% of the videos were not captured in their entirety. So there were 2 videos that ended early and 2 videos that started late. Per Directive 4.21, if an officer deactivates their camera prior to the conclusion of the incident, they are required to state out loud why they did that. And neither of the officers did that in the sample that we observed. And lastly, in this sample, we saw 0 instances of prohibited activity. And again, just kind of keeping consistent with identifying problems and offering solutions, we definitely just wanted to have some action steps for the 15th district. One of the first ones that we suggested for them was for supervisors to reiterate during roll call that officers need to turn their cameras on as soon as they get them at the start of their shift. We also suggested that, as supervisors are out in the field, that they're just checking and making sure that officers' cameras are on. It's apparent when an officer has their camera on, the LED light will blink. So it is, something that they are able to do as they're out in the field with their patrol officers. The second action step that we have here is to use these roll call meetings again, just to review Directive 4.21 and ensure officers have a clear understanding of when they're required to activate their cameras. And again, this kind of gets back to just some of the ambiguity in the directive. I think a lot of people, or a lot of officers, I should say, aren't really sure when they should record things. So I think just reviewing that directive and getting the habit of officers having a clear understanding is a best practice. And our third and final action step was for the supervisors to use these roll call meetings to remind officers to record as they're providing backup to other officers. Again, this is an evidentiary, I think something that helps with collecting evidence. And then we also just want to make sure that all officers are capturing the incident as outlined in their directive. Is that it?
That's the last slide.
Great. Do any commissioners have any questions? Anyone have any questions at all for us?
Commissioner Solomon, yes, I have a question. Based on whatever findings we've been able to do, would you say, I'm not even sure you can answer this question or not, but what would you say are some of the leading causes of an officer not turning on the camera? Is it like more so negligence or like intentional? Like what would you say?
Yeah, kind of based on some of the conversations that we're able to have with the district leadership. It's hard to tell. I mean, there are probably some instances in which an officer is purposely not activating their camera, but I don't think we can necessarily say that that's the majority of these incidents. I do think that sometimes officers might go to a district, say after they come out of the academy, and then they might adopt the practices of that district. We've done this 3 times now, and I think some of the evidence suggests that that there is some fluctuation in the districts and how they comply with certain metrics. So I think it kind of depends on a lot of factors. I would think that a lot of it comes back to training. I am interested in also just kind of circling back and attending diversion. I think a lot of officers will go through diversion for body worn camera. So getting feedback from them and understanding why they violated the policy, I think is an important factor in trying to determine, why they're not recording these videos. So I don't know if I have a clear answer for you, John, but I think there's a lot of different factors.
I think that was helpful. I also asked this question. Uh, are we able to evaluate certain districts where it's more common for cameras to be turned on in their interactions? Like like is it more common in are we able to evaluate that it's more common in certain districts for the officers that actually turn their cameras on? Is that a thing we can evaluate, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I think so. When we started this project, we basically selected the four districts that were representative of the six police divisions, and we wanted to make sure that
Mhm.
there was some variety. So, with the 15th, the 18th, the 24th, and then the last district that we're going to do is the 22nd, we felt that there was, a good representation of the different parts of the city as well as
Mhm.
the different divisions. So in that, there has been, again, some fluctuation in their compliance. It is kind of hard to tell. Like, I think we would have to collect a lot of data that we don't necessarily have access to right now,
Mhm.
in order to determine, like, you know, which districts are activating their cameras most often. And then we would have to kind of go back and work from there. So, we haven't done it yet, but, we are planning on taking a step back after we finish our audit of the 22nd district and kind of like reviewing this project in its totality before we move forward and just kind of seeing like what works, what doesn't work, and like how we can get the most out of this project. So it's not off the table, but we are, we're analyzing this process as we go along.
I think that was like my main purpose of asking that question, just being able to find out like why is it working in certain districts versus others. So thank you for sharing that information.
Something I'll note too is that the way technology is moving forward with body-worn cameras is that like future models of body-worn cameras in the Philadelphia Police Department may be able to automatically activate. Like if one officer turns a camera on, then all cameras in a certain vicinity could activate through like Bluetooth technology. There could be some other versions of automatic activation. Like PPD isn't there yet, but I think like down the road, technology would make this type of audit maybe a little bit obsolete because hopefully it would just be they're all turning on. I mean, there's would be complications and other factors to consider with that, but um, we're fortunate that technology is improving and can help with this sort of accountability, but it's not there yet, so we continue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mike, I do not have a question, but as always, great job. Your conveyance of such a substantial amount of information is always professional, always on point, and it is always very clear. So thank you so very much for the work that you have done for this effort and for all the other efforts that you put forth to make this work at CPOC happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner.
All right. I think Owari, you're up.
Good evening, commissioners, colleagues, and community. This is the deputy's desk. Mawario Siande, our deputy executive director. And this is a new development here at CPOC, and we're very excited for this. This is a session in where once a month we take a look at some of the issues relating to civilian oversight and try to take a deeper dive to provide some education for the benefit of our commissioners and our community. Next slide, Danny. Thank you. Tonight, we're going to begin a series that looks particularly at a term that you may have heard in some of our work, that being Act 111. We're looking at challenges to effective independent oversight. And here in the city of Philadelphia, which is in the state of Pennsylvania, Act 111 does impact the work of civilian oversight and the work of CPOC in ways that are critical. And for us to better appreciate these obstacles, it is in our interest to better appreciate laws such as Act 111. Next slide, Danny. So I begin, as I often do, with our legislation and want to remind us and our viewers of the legislation that the city has provided for this work that CPOC is authorized to do. Our legislation provides CPOC the authority to conduct independent investigations into the police. The law writes that the commission shall conduct investigations into such complaints as it determines in its discretion, except as provided in subsection 3 below. The commission shall not investigate, and the things that the commission cannot investigate include complaints involving violations of the city's internal EEO policies, as well as complaints of department employees involving purely internal employment matters. So with that understanding, what in effect CPOC has the legislative authority to conduct investigations into is all other such complaints of violations within the PPD. Next slide, please. One of the impediments to our ability to pursue what the legislation provides us is what is called third-party grievance arbitration. This is taken from the collective bargaining agreement that exists presently between the Fraternal Order of Police and the City of Philadelphia. In the contract, it states that all demands for arbitration involving disciplinary terminations of police officers will be heard by a member of the Police Termination Arbitration Board, or PTAB. Next slide, please. Here's what we should know, that aspect of the police contract that I just referred to, known as grievance arbitration, originates in Act 111. Tonight, we're not going to take a deep dive into the act itself, but in a future session, we will do that. I'll share for now that there's a state court case called Betancourt that outlines the standard upon which grievance arbitration with respect to the police is understood. Also want to note that it is not universal. A couple of things that we ought to appreciate. The first is that not all civilian oversight agencies across the country, one, have the authorization by their legislation to conduct independent oversight of the police. There are those others that in fact do. That these obstacles, such as Act 111 and grievance arbitration, are not universal, meaning that there are states throughout the United States that don't have such things. And but as I said again, we will go more into that in the months to come. Act 111 became state law in Pennsylvania in June 1968. It provides police and firefighters collective bargaining rights, including mandatory binding arbitration to resolve disputes in exchange for legal prohibition against strikes. Tonight, you can go to the next slide, Danny. Tonight, we're going to look at the political dynamics and social realities that help us understand why and how Act 111 came to be law in June 1968. Next slide. I begin with Dr. King and the March on Washington, because of course we understand that we cannot discuss the 1960s in the United States without appreciating the civil rights movement. It was represented a categorical shift in civil rights law in the United States in ways that were not just historic for its time, but for ways to continue to impact the lives of everyday people in this country today. In Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, he makes note of the realities of police brutality. He says, there are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied. As long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Goes on to say, no, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. That speech was given on August 28th, 1963. 11 months later, then President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964, July 2nd, 1964. That act outlaws segregation in public facilities. It also outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Now, for many at this time in our nation's history, there were those that were under the impression that this would thereby end the civil rights movement, that there was no longer a need for the organizing, the mobilizing, and the protesting that had come to be known by the folks who were followers of Dr. King and other leaders such as Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer. But of course, we know that was not, in fact, the end. That following year, a number of cities erupted in what were called urban riots. In 1966, in an interview with CBS on the Mike Wallace Show, Dr. King states, in his response to a question about these riots, as they were called, that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the economic plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. Here's what we should know, is that in 1963, 1964, the African-American population across the country existed at upwards of 50% of Black folks lived in poverty. That the unemployment rate for Black people in 1964 was double the rate of the white community. These are the economic realities that would lead Dr. King to make not just this comment, but to also cause Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, of which he was the executive director, to shift their agenda. Dr. King also talked about the fact that he had fought all throughout the South for Black folk to have the right to sit at the lunch counter, and not paid enough attention to the fact that many Black folks could not afford to sit at that same lunch counter. So they moved a lot of their campaigns into the North, including televised campaigns in Boston and Chicago. Dr. King and his family actually moved into a tenement building in Chicago in 1965 and 1966. Here in Philadelphia, that tension erupts in what is called the Columbia Avenue Rebellion of 1964. Literally occurs a year following the March on Washington. August 28th to the 30th of 1964, right there on Columbia Avenue, up there in North Philadelphia, we have a Black couple. Word on the street is that the woman involved in this incident was pregnant. They are stopped by Philadelphia police officers who begin to harass them, and word spread. Some people worried or wondered whether or not they were, harmed by the police, given the condition that the woman was pregnant. This area of North Philadelphia was 70% African American. Racial segregation in housing was never just a South reality. It was present all across this country, and Philadelphia was no exception. This rebellion and the police response also was a turning point in the career of none other than Frank Rizzo, who at the time was the deputy commissioner in charge of patrol officers, who would later become a commissioner and go on to become the mayor of Philadelphia. Next slide, please. During this period in Philadelphia, much of the civil rights struggle centered around the work of Cecil B. Moore, who was then the head of the NAACP chapter here in Philadelphia to desegregate Girard College. This picture that you see here is following the demonstration that was led by Cecil B. Moore. You see Rizzo there in the dark uniform, turning to, I guess, somebody calling after these officers. And you see there the third individual, the African-American girl, there surrounded by officers. The caption under the photo reads, "Rizzo with a club leading police beating on a black girl demonstrator at State Office Building, Broad and Spring Garden Streets." In July of 1965, there were many protests and demonstrations led by Cecil B. Moore against the segregationist policies of Girard College, which at the time was an all-white boys' school in the heart of the black community there in Philadelphia. Next slide, please. Dr. King made a few trips to Philadelphia during this period. This here is just to note the fact that Dr. King spoke there at the corner in 40th and Lancaster on August 3rd in 1965, where a bust and a mural are now present in his honor. The picture to the left of the bust is Dr. King speaking in front of Girard College, calling on city officials to desegregate the college. In November 17 in 1967, Black students conducted a demonstration to protest what they considered were the white curriculum and the policies of the city of Philadelphia that did not permit the hiring of African-American teachers, the hiring of African-American staff in the Department of Education, as well as the various cultural activities that Black students believe that the schools ought to be providing for them. Upwards of thousands of students across Philadelphia organized a walkout November 17 in 1967 and demonstrated, met up at the old education building on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Rizzo, who is now commissioner of the PPD, buses in an extra 400 cops to put down the demonstration. At the time, the Harvard-educated Mark Shedd, who was then the head of the Department of Education in Philadelphia, called it a police riot. Next slide, please. The following year, of course, we know Dr. King is assassinated on April 4th in Memphis as he's there to organize sanitation workers. Next slide, please. The same day that Dr. King is assassinated, then Governor of California, Ronald Reagan, of course, we know would become president in the 1980s, states, in response to a reporter asking him about Dr. King's assassination, says a great tragedy that began when we began compromising with law and order, and people started choosing which laws they would break. And what Reagan is doing here is he's capturing a sentiment that had been present among many within the white community regarding the civil rights actions of Black folks following the passage of both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, 64 and 65. That Black people and, please go back, Danny, that Black folks in our efforts to achieve civil rights were engaging in actions that were in fact criminal and ought to be put down by police. That's what the campaign of Richard Nixon that led to his election was based upon, this call for law and order. That's what Reagan is referencing here. Next slide, Danny. Thank you. So summing it up, this time period to help us appreciate how police unions became the very formidable unions that they are presently, not just here in the city of Philadelphia, but particularly here in the city of Philadelphia. This history is very informative. This is a quote from an article, actually more than an article. It's a doctoral paper done by Aaron Thomas Beckemeyer entitled The Labor of Law and Order, How Police Unions Transformed Policing and Politics in the United States, 1939 to 1985, published by the Harvard University Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. He says, but from the 1950s to the 1970s, police unionists deployed narratives that shifted public opinion in their favor, tapping into white homeowners and business owners' fear of civil rights politics and a complex mix of actual and perceived rising crime. Police organizers ran sophisticated publicity campaigns arguing that police needed to secure their pay, working conditions, and autonomy on the job to secure the public from social and political threats to safety and order. Unions and collective bargaining, they insisted, would help them win these conditions, protect them from the ostensible threats of the Black freedom movement and from liberal reform politicians eager to subordinate police autonomy to centralized oversight and control. Next slide, please. This is echoed in a legal article that was published by Connecticut Law Review entitled The Rise of Police Unions on the Back of the Black Liberation Movement. The author, Aisha Bell Hardaway, writes that police unions and their members loudly supported aggressive tactics against Black liberation activists and other protesters, but the support extended beyond the union halls and police headquarters. The successful political careers of Charles Stenvig in Minneapolis and Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia, among others, are strong indications of a more symbiotic relationship between police union interests and the larger community. This relationship was, at least in some ways, a consequence of aligned common interests focused on suppressing racial equality. Next slide, please. So I want us to appreciate, particularly as we are faced often in our city with media narratives that suggest that the reason why CPOC lacks independent oversight or independent investigation powers into police policies and practices is because of a fault of us. There's something wrong or lacking with us. That is not true. Much of the reason, if not all of the reason, has much to do with Act 111. The history that I just shared with you informs us into the mentality of the forces that were at work that led to acts such as Act 111 here in the state of Pennsylvania. But what you ought to know is that such acts were being enacted across the country at this time. I share this quote by Dr. King again as our final statement to help us appreciate that when we talk about the work of civilian oversight of the police, what we are in fact talking about is the work of advancing civil rights. At a time in which we are living presently, where we are witnessing an attack on civil rights, whether it is an attack on voting rights, whether it is an attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and policies of both the public and private sector, whether it is an attack on the rights of due process for people who are not citizens of this country. We can make the argument in fact can be made that Some of the rollback that we are witnessing with respect to civilian oversight across this country is indeed a precursor to these attacks that we're seeing every evening on the news. I remind us of Dr. King in his quote where he says in his I Have a Dream speech, there are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I would argue this is our guidepost. This is our shining light. This is the thing that keeps us motivated even when it doesn't look like we're going to make any headway in our work. Certainly the struggle is serious. Certainly the challenges arrayed against us are real. But we have we have some forebears that have done a lot of great things that enable each of us to exist in the roles that we exist in right now. And so, as I said, this is just our beginning. This was just to give the context for some of the challenges that we are facing, not just as this agency, but the work of civilian oversight across the country. In our next session, we will look specifically at Act 111 and talk more broadly about grievance arbitration and the impact it makes on the work of civilian oversight. Thank you all. If there's any comments or questions at this time from commissioners, we will take them and then we'll leave it for the commission to open up the floor for the community.
I just want to say, you did an excellent job. I am one who's deeply into history and providing historical context behind modern issues. So yeah, I just want to say you did it. Like I said, you did a great job, and hopefully, for those that did not know some of the information that you provided us, that we can take this with us in our journey, and that we are empowered to continue to do the work. So that's what I would say. Thank you. Wonderful job.
Much appreciated, Commissioner. Thank you.
I have a comment. Can I comment?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if this is going to be, I'm just going to say it because I grew up in Spring Garden and Francisville, Poplar Street. That was my neighborhood. That's where the riots happened up and down Ridge Avenue. And a lot of those young people that were fighting along Cecil B. Moore were actually some of my OGs, which are from the Tenderloins and the Moroccos and the two OGs. Those were my OGs. They were young people in the 60s and 70s that were gang members, but it's not like the gangs that you see on TV. They were activists. They were fighting to survive. They were fighting to grow. And I see that in our young people today. So I want to thank you so much for this presentation. It just touched my heart. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
As always, Deputy, job well done. Job well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Much appreciated. Thank you. All right, Danny, I'll turn it back over to our director, Tanya McClary, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Just one more opportunity for any commissioners to ask any questions or comments about any of the agency report. All right, well, I'm putting it back in the hand of, I don't see the chair, so vice chair. Oh, there it is. All right, there is the chair. All right, chair, turn it back over to you.
Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Just making sure you guys can hear me. It's that time of the meeting again. Once again, this is the community colloquy. I ask if you have any questions or comments at this time. And we're talking about the people in the chat as well as commissioners, staff all together. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand now. Or while I'm reading the community colloquy, if you have a comment that you don't want to speak, you just want to write it in the chat, write it in the chat now. And with that being said, I will dive into the community colloquy. Be advised, I read this community colloquy verbatim, so there is no change on a week-to-week basis. All right? And with that, I have to find the community colloquy. Okay, here we go. We welcome public comment and feedback. If you would like to speak, please tell us now by raising your hand or sending a request in the chat with your full name. You may also submit a written public comment through the chat, which will be read aloud. Each commenter will be unmuted and given 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and address your comments to me, the chair. Please refrain from offensive language, threats, and/or harassments, or you will be removed from the meeting. While we appreciate your input, we may not be able to respond to your questions or comments immediately. Every attempt will be made to follow up by phone and/or email after the meeting. Be advised you can contact CPOC at cpoc@phila.gov. I repeat, that is cpoc@phila.gov. Or you can call us using 215-685-0891. And with that being said, I'll open the floor to public comment.
Looks like we have a hand raised by Gail. I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here tonight. I'm Gail Lax from Live Free Philly Coalition. We used to be with Power, now we're out on our own. And we have done a lot of work on the ins and outs of Act 111. So I just wanted to thank the deputy on this excellent presentation tonight. I had a question about another topic, which is I read an article in the Inquirer a few weeks ago about the drones that are used in the police department. And I wondered if there are plans to do more research on the police department's use of drones, if there are plans to make the public more aware of how the police are using the drones, where they're using the drones, and things of that nature. So that's my question.
Chair, you're muted.
And with that, I'll let the executive director answer the question at this time.
So, Gail, thank you for the question. What we are going to...
I think it was Hassan's. I muted him. You were fine, Tanya.
Gail? Okay, great. So thank you for the question. You know, we are going to be looking into several projects, and one of the things that CPOC is very interested in is technology. So as we start to look at more and more technology, you heard even Director Zajac mention in her presentation about all the new things that are coming to the police departments, right? All the new technology. So we haven't figured out which pieces of the technology we are going to be doing deep dives on, but we are going to be taking a look at the technology, and we will keep the community up to date as we roll forth some of those projects.
We do also have an explainer from 2024 about police's use of drones that might have some information, though I know there's more probably coming out with their new uses. But I just put that in the chat for context as well.
And if any of you had a chance to watch the public safety budget hearing, there were several council people that also had questions for Commissioner Bethel about PPD's use of drones. So I think this is on a lot of people's minds.
I don't see any other hands raised, Chair, and no other comments in the chat. You are muted, sir.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments at this time? And with that being said, no questions or comments. Do I hear a motion at this time?
Vice Chair Rockman here. I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
That is Vice Chair Rockman motioning to adjourn tonight's meeting. Does anyone second that motion? And that is Commissioner Erica Stewart seconding the motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, say aye.
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 Aye, and with that, unanimously, tonight's meeting is adjourned. You guys
Thank you,
enjoy.
everyone.
Till next time.
Good night.